Hi Virgo, welcome to your April 2020 Astro Update. It's Reina here. So I was kind of like, okay, what month are we in? Because I'm recording this in March. And, when you're doing something in advance, you're not always on the same page. So April is a month that when we get towards the second half of the month, I think you're really going to like that because then the sun goes into Taurus, which is a fellow earth sign, and that forms a trine. And that really is when you feel the most like you can accomplish things. When you have what is going on before that, which is the Aries energy, you're looking at what is called an inconjunction, where there are two planets that are 150 degrees apart. And it's very, weird. That's the best way I can think of putting it. And what you do is you look at the elements. So you're talking about with Aries, we're talking about fire, and then with Virgo, we're talking about earth. And it's like they just don't go together. Earth is very practical, fire is very idealistic and visionary. Well, you could say those are almost similar things in certain ways. And so that's just a little aside there. The sun is in Aries until the 19th. That's your 8th house, and that's a very deep house. That's the house of Scorpio, the house that Scorpio rules in the universal chart. So it's all things scorpionic, and it's looking below the surface of life. This can be your own, beyond your own surface, digging deep inside of your psyche. And suffice it to say, when the sun is here, Mercury is going to be in here, it's not taking things at face value and perhaps even being a bit mysterious because you're not really in the mode of being externalized. This is a water house, so it's introspective more than you could ever say that it's extroverted, and on the 3rd, Venus goes into Gemini. Now that's a hard angle as well. Because it's a square, but this is an angular house, the 10th house. This reading is for Virgo sun and rising, so this is your squaring off to your first house. But this is how it always is. The first house is an angular house, the 4th house and the 7th house as well. These are areas of great growth and change. And the 10th house is your career sector. So suffice it to say that it butts up against who you are in this moment versus who you want to become in the world. And with Venus here, it's actually a very nice thing. Even though we're talking about, it forming a square, Venus is very harmonizing. And Venus in the 10th house can give you popularity. Now, whether or not you need popularity in your career of choice is a whole other matter altogether. But the 10th house can be authority figures. So this might be that if you're looking for a job that you come across in a way where people actually want to help you, that they take a liking to you. And therefore, it can indicate somebody who comes across charismatically. Yeah, you can say that. In a charismatic manner to the people that you're trying to impress that hold the key to your career aspirations and things like that. It can also, if you're, whatever you're doing right now, maybe you get a raise because Venus can mean money. And this is in the career sector or money from your father. if you've had any kind of a, like a probate issue with the eighth house activity in recent months, that might have some connection to the father side of the family as well. So then we have a full moon at 18 degrees of Libra occurring on the 7th of April, and this is your second house of earned income. So that could also be some kind of boost to your finances. And it might come in the form of a raise, but possibly money that has been coming to you, because the full moon can bring a culmination. So if you, for instance, do the kind of work where you can get bonuses or you can get commissions, then that might be especially true. Or who knows, maybe even in some cases retirement, or leaving a company and getting like the, what do they call that, the golden parachute. I don't know if they still have those. This is also a house of self-esteem. It's not just about money, the second house. So this can be about looking at, you've been doing all this psychological work, whether you've liked to or not, and really seeing what your self-esteem is like, or boosting it in some way, what your needs are. And that's really great. That's how you identify how you want to go after particular things. So on the 11th, we have Mercury going into Aries. So that 8th house. The other thing, too, that I didn't point out, well, I didn't have to with the sun because it was there from the beginning of the month. But Mercury is going to be in the 7th house until the 11th, which means that this is the area of relationship. So Mercury transiting from the 7th to the 8th house means that if you're in a committed partnership, you and this other person may be communicating at a deeper level instead of, the superficial kind of ways that people, even who are married, the 7th house could be a married couple. Even that level of commitment, people can go through the motions and not really deeply talk about things, talk about their true feelings. Libra rules the 7th house, and a lot of times Libra is about keeping the peace and harmony and things like that, because Venus is the ruler of this house. And therefore, I was laughing to myself thinking the ruler of the 8th house, the ruler of Scorpio, is Mars and Pluto. So quite a bit different from Venus. And it doesn't mean ruthless communication with Mercury in the 8th. It means probing communication. Like, what are you really feeling? Let's get our cards out on the table here. And for yourself, like the shadow work, looking at the parts of yourself that you kind of disown, that you refuse to acknowledge are part of, or those feelings. Even though we're talking about Mercury, it can still be about analyzing your feelings. The ones that are more challenging, the jealousies, the, envy is the cousin of jealousy, right? The prejudices or the resentments and these sort of things. So it's very like deep, and Virgo, you tend to be very kind of matter of fact, being an earth sign, maybe somewhat detached in a lot of ways. So this may be challenging for you, unless maybe you have the moon in Scorpio and it's like right up your alley. Who knows? Okay. So, and this even can be like if there's some kind of a probate issue that Mercury can be contracts, and maybe you're communicating about a probate matter, because the eighth house is other people's money, and it's also the house of death. So, any kind of contracts that come from death money, for instance. On the 19th, we have the sun going into Taurus. Now, this is what I was referring to at the beginning, because it's an earth sign. It forms a trine, so it's much more in alignment with what you're all about. And that earthy energy, I think that you really resonate a lot more with that, because it's something that is tangible. It's not kind of, that psychological stuff it's pretty abstract. It's not something that is easily understood, easy to get a handle on, or even in the flesh. So the sun goes into the ninth house. This is Sagittarius' house in the universal chart. Very philosophical, very expansive, very positive, because the ruler is Jupiter. And I should have mentioned this because, Leo had some of this as well. This is also the area of long distance travel. So if there's any kind of plans that you have in this regard, that might be coming up for you in the second half of April. And you have a new moon. It's at an early degree of Taurus, 3 degrees, on the 22nd. And I have been noting that the number 3 is a number of abundance, is a number of creativity and just joy. And actually, in the major arcana of the Tarot, the number 3 card of the major arcana is the Empress, and that is connected to Venus. That is connected to Taurus as well as Libra. And so to me, this is, a new moon in Taurus in and of itself can be something that connects with the senses. Now for you, it's happening in your ninth house, so it can be more on the mental level, if anything else, because the ninth house is a mental house, so it's really dealing with university, your philosophical beliefs, God, whatever you want to, how you want to view it, and long distance travel. So new beginnings in this area. On the 25th, we have Pluto going retrograde. Pluto's an outer planet, a generational planet, and it has spent almost a generation in your 5th house of romance. So obviously, or maybe not obviously to you, depending on how much you know about astrology, Virgo, but it all depends on what degree of sun or rising your Virgo is in, to determine exactly what house this is going to fall. But because it's already at 25 degrees, Pluto, it entered Capricorn in 2008. So here we are, 2020, 12 years later. I'm sure by now it has entered most people's 5th house, and therefore is, and you may have had it here for years, and this is kind of changing your idea of love, and also the creative process, which includes children and conceiving children. Now, I'm not going to get too much into that, but suffice it to say that when people are blocked creatively, they may take another route. So maybe somebody really is artistic, and yet for some reason, they were discouraged, or they just don't see that within themselves, and they end up reproducing. And there's nothing wrong with reproducing as long as you really feel that sense that it's the right thing to do. But if you're doing it without being intentional and doing it over and over again, then that can create a bit of, a lot of problems for the individual, let alone, the offspring. But the person may complicate their lives incredibly. And the thing is, it's like the idea of creating is just a natural urge that is probably a spiritual urge, really, that we are creative beings. And so there is nothing bizarre about wanting to create. It's just the manner in which you do so. And so perhaps you are really undergoing a great transformation in this area. But we're talking about outer versus inner. Now that Pluto is retrograding, it brings the inner process into this. Now, it could be as simple as if you have had several children and maybe you feel like maybe in some cases people have children to keep a relationship going, for instance. The fifth house is the house of love. So it's going to change that for you. And with the full moon in your second house, you may kind of also get some downloads into what this has to do with your self-esteem. So, wanting children, but questioning, why do I want them? Especially if you already have more than one, and being like, okay, what is going on with me? Do I really want this child, or am I doing it for an ulterior motive? And how can I kind of like discern, whether or not I'm doing this for the right reasons? For an artist, this could be like really going deep within yourself, which is the source of the creative process, instead of maybe like if you feel like you've been very what's that word, where you're derivative, where you're copying somebody else, you don't feel like you're being original, these kinds of things, kind of like plumbing the depths of your psyche or what have you. And then on the 27th, we have Mercury in Taurus in the 9th house. And so this is going to be looking, maybe even in some cases, enrolling in college. Who knows? Getting your paperwork for college and things like that. Or getting your passport if you're going to travel. So, yeah, it's a very interesting month. It's a lot of deep thinking, a lot of, big picture stuff going on for you, for whatever reason, Virgo. Maybe because you just had a full moon in your sign and there was super moon, you're really thinking about a different way of being. And this is all coming together with your belief system and all that good stuff. Okay, Virgo, that's what I have for you. I hope that you receive something from this. If you'd like a private reading, the link is below. Take care.